Thank you for staying with us. Now, Duduzile Zuma-Sambudla, the daughter of former South African President Jacob Zuma, resigned from Parliament following the launch of a police investigation into her alleged role in illegally recruiting 17 young South African men to serve as mercenaries for Russia in the war against Ukraine. Now, the investigation centers on allegations that the men who have since sent distress calls home are deceived or were deceived with promises of lucrative job contracts, on security training only to be forced onto the front lines in the Donbas region. Now, the South African government, which maintains an official policy of non-alignment in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, has condemned the exploitation of these vulnerable citizens and is working diplomatically to secure their safe return. This unauthorized foreign military assistance or mercenary activity is a criminal offense under the country's Foreign Military Assistance Act of 1998, a law that the government is upholding as it investigates the circumstances surrounding the deceptive recruitment. Now, joining us on the conversation is Willem Els. He's a senior training coordinator in ACT Program Institute for Security Studies. We also have Alexander von Rugen, global policy analyst, who will be joining us in a bit, and Tebogo Mashilompane. He is national leader, Forum for South Africa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us at this time.
Thank you.
So let me begin with you, Willem. We would love to have your thoughts on this, starting with the obvious. She says, Duduzile says she's resigning to focus on bringing these men home. But police confirm that they are investigating her for sending them there in the first place. In fact, her own half-sister, filed the affidavit calling this a recruitment scheme. Let's have your thoughts.
Good evening to you, and good evening to your guests. Yes, indeed, this is really troublesome. We see that she resigned after she's been charged on these acts under the act of our Foreign Mercenary Act of 1998, as you mentioned. And in that act, it criminalizes going and being recruited and going to fight as a mercenary, but also rendering assistance and also the recruitment of these people. So we must just reiterate that this case is still being investigated and she's not been found guilty. So that is where we are at the moment. We also saw that this morning 5 additional people were arrested after they were taken off a plane en route to Russia to join these mercenaries. But also we saw that a prominent radio presenter has been arrested along with them as being the facilitator and recruiter. So that case is also still under investigation, but that is where we are at the moment.
All right, so let's hear from you as well, Tebogo. What are your thoughts on this? Because the South African government says that they received distress calls from these men, but how did they even leave without state security, raising a single red flag in the first place? Would you say this is an intelligence failure, or did authorities decide to look the other way?
To Mr. Els, look, we've maintained from day one that we've got a weak intelligence in the country, because it did not make sense. How would 17 men leave this country without being traced? We saw it in Botswana when they tried that. They were tracked down and they were arrested in South Africa. But these 17 men left. There were prior conversations, there were arrangements and so forth. And then where was intelligence at that moment? Didn't this raise flag when they were at the airport trying to board a flight, and they were just left like that, and then they went to that particular country? So our position as a movement is that the government must work on bringing them back home, so that when they're here, they are able to tell the government who actually recruited them and then send them to this war. Because if the government leaves them outside of the country, we are not going to get to the bottom of this thing. So we are saying the government of South Africa must make sure that they bring them in this country. They must act with speed so that they come here, and all involved people must face the full might of the law. So that is our position as the forum.
All right, now let me pass this question to Willem. Now, Tebogo said, the government needs to work on bringing them home, but then the government officials have keep using the phrase quiet diplomacy. But while they whisper, in diplomatic corridors, these families, the families of these men are actually terrified. So when does this quiet diplomacy become silent complicity?
Of like you mentioned, our non-aligned status that have been claimed, and also the relationship that South Africa has got both with Ukraine as well as with Russia. But we see that with Russia, South Africa is part of the BRICS nations, and they got a very open channel in order to engage diplomatically with their Russian counterparts. The challenges that we face there is, a diplomatic sort of processes take sometimes very long. The indications are that these people have been moved to the front in the Donbas. And, if you look at the strategy that is being used by the Russians, the so-called meat grinder strategy, where they take inexperienced mercenaries and soldiers, as well as even convicts that they took out of the prison, and they just throw them to the front, and their survival rate is not very high. So what we would expect is that they, as soon as possible, would try to intervene in order to prevent these people from being moved to the front line, because when they get there, chances of coming back alive to South Africa is not very good.
But they are on the front line. Now, this law you speak of, I'm still on you, Willem. Let's look at the law. Now, the Foreign Military Assistance Act of 1998 explicitly jails citizens for mercenary activity. Yet, we have experts like Professor Michel Nel point out that prosecutions are almost non-existent. So, if these 17 men survive and actually come home, will they be arrested as criminals, or will they be treated like victims?
Yeah, I think that is a very good point there, because if you look at the Act, even though it was promulgated back in 1998, it was promulgated as a result of a lot of South Africans that were recruited to fight as mercenaries up in Africa, especially back in the time in Liberia. And that was actually to prevent them and to discourage them from doing so. And what we saw in practicality, this act has actually never been tested in court, because all the people that returned, they actually pleaded struck a plea bargain, and they paid a fine. So it was never been tested in court. So that is the one thing that we should take into account. And these people, of course, they are innocent until they're found guilty. So when they return to South Africa, they will be intercepted. They will be debriefed by our intelligence, as well as by our specialized investigation unit. And should they then find that they have a prima facie case with the investigation, of course, then they will be prosecuted.
Okay. Now let's come back to you, Tebogo. Tebogo, we've heard the MK party, say that they are not involved. Yet the police investigations actually points to specific recruiters linked to the party. So what are your thoughts? Because if a political party is using its influence to funnel unemployed youths into a foreign war, isn't that grounds to even deregister the party entirely?
Yeah, look, the issue of the party, we might excuse them for now and look at individuals who have been appointed at, like you look at Sambudla, Zuma's daughter, for an example. Even now she has resigned from positions. And then let's look at her and then leave the party for now. And then the investigation will point out whether the party was directly involved or not. But now we've got the lead. The investigators have the lead now, based on the case opened by the half-sister, and also Sambudla herself admitting to the fact that she had the communication with a man that she does not know, who assisted her in recruiting these particular people. And then obviously, let's focus on her. And then the investigation must establish if MK party is also involved in this particular thing. For now, we can't summarize it to say MK party is fully involved. But of course, we can see that there's a link. But can we investigate this one and get to the bottom of the truth? Once we have the truth, we can now establish if MK party as a party is involved in this thing, and also to boast their influence in the political space, as they also claim that they are party in waiting, they are saying they are government in waiting. So that must be established after these individuals have been dealt with.
All right. Now let's come back to Alexander. I'm being told that he has rejoined. Alexander, thank you for joining us at the moment. Let's hear your thoughts. I'm sure you've listened to what Willem and Tebogo had to say. Now, critics would actually say that this is selective outrage because, South Africans have fought in other foreign armies like the IDF, without this level of government panic. So what are your thoughts? Why is there so much panic now?
Well, I think we have to look at what was the method of recruitment? Was it for employment or was it to serve in the military? I mean, the optics right now are showing these gentlemen went to be trained as bodyguards and security and then were forced into military servitude once they were in Russia.
Yeah.
It gives the MK plausible deniability in trying to help citizens of South Africa for employment abroad. And unless they were complicit in the military recruitment, what are they guilty of?
Oh, well, so is the government, because some have actually also said that the government is only scrambling now because, this involves Russia and it kind of like embarrasses them on the global stage.
Well, definitely. It's no secret. Ramaphosa is in conflict with President Trump. President Trump is trying to be a peacemaker in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. If South Africa is complicit in supplying troops to Russia, it's basically prolonging the war. There's a double-edged sword here because if one party in South Africa wants to point the finger at the other in an illegal recruitment, okay, that's a political stance in South Africa. The results of that will speak for itself in South Africa. On an international basis, South Africa is also a member of the BRICS Pact. So is Russia. They're getting pressure from President Trump. The verbal battles between Ramaphosa and Trump have been publicized on the news almost every day, especially with his boycott of the G20 summit, the recent one. That certainly adds to the complexities here, and it's not an easy fix.
Okay. Now let's come back to Willem. Willem, we know that Duduzile is a high-profile figure, but if this was an ordinary citizen accused of smuggling fighters to a war zone, they'd be in handcuffs already. So would you say that she's being protected by her surname or, being elitist?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because, there's a current case against her at the moment that stems from the 2012 uproar and of incitement, where she's been charged under our Counterterrorism Act here in South Africa. So that case is a parallel case with this one, and this case now just adds some fuel to her troubles and also to the controversy surrounding the family. So that is a challenge, but we also understand that especially now with the Israel war, that some South Africans that went there because of their descent, etc., and they went to fight there, they are also under investigation. So behind the scenes, it seems that there is a real drive by government and by the law enforcement in order to stem this tide of South Africans being lured or going voluntarily to fight in other countries.
Okay. Now, Tebogo, we know that similarly, Jordan recently rebuked Russia publicly for recruiting. Oh, I think we've lost Tebogo. So let me.
Here.
Oh, you're here. All right. So Jordan recently rebuked Russia publicly for recruiting its citizens. So why hasn't South Africa issued a similarly strong public demand to the Kremlin to stop recruiting its people?
Yeah. From what the guests are saying with regard to South Africa being part of BRICS and Russia being part of BRICS, it becomes very difficult for South Africa to directly rebuke Russia for doing that. Because it is common cause that Russia is aware of what is currently happening, because Ukraine distanced itself from recruiting South Africans. And then we know from history that Russia has been recruiting Africans to go and fight. So at this moment, South Africa cannot confront Russia for many reasons. Alliance purposes, solidarity purposes, because if South Africa now goes harsh on Russia, remember we've got a challenge with the US and Israel. So obviously South Africa might be in a compromising position, be left out out there, and then anyone can attack South Africa. So Russia remains a strong friend of South Africa with regard to even military issues, with regard to protection and solidarity. So it's not easy for South Africa at the moment, especially that South Africa has attracted enemies. In the First World War countries like America, for an example, and America is a friend or a puppet of Israel. So that is why South Africa cannot confront them in that fashion. But we maintain that even if it's like that, South Africa can still talk to Russia as a friend and say, let our people come back home, and then we'll deal with them when they come here, because they will come and explain and say, we were recruited under false pretense to say we are going there for security purposes, or if they knew that we're going to be mercenaries, and the government will punish them. The laws are there, and then they can punish them. So, and then because the most important thing at the moment for South Africa is not to jump on that particular cross where we are going to fight with Russia unnecessarily, because we still need them in the future. So we need to be wise when we're dealing with the issue of Russia. But having said that, that does not mean that we must not tell them that South Africans must come back.
Okay. Now, Alexander, if these men are killed in action, before they can be repatriated, does the South African government hold Russia responsible for their deaths, or, the recruiters back in KwaZulu-Natal? Where does the buck stop?
Well, I think it's the old adage: if you point the shotgun at the crowd, you're bound to catch the legal parties. In this case, if Russia has used false inducement to lure these gentlemen into serving in their military, it's on Russia. If the recruiters were aware of the recruiting being for the military, they're also complicit and they're liable. But if they have plausible deniability, I think that's something the investigation has to bring out. If the politics are being played here because it's the opposition party, then there's going to be mudslinging anyway. That's politics. But the investigation will uncover, I would hope, the truth as to how these inducements are done. Now, let's look at the history of how this happened. When the war broke out, there was a call around the planet to assist Ukraine. Many foreign mercenaries are working on the Ukrainian side, but they're all volunteers. There was no false inducement. Putin took advantage of that and says, well, I'm having problems recruiting in my own country. I have a lot of draft dodgers. Many men of military age have fled the country to avoid the conscription. So the North Koreans have come to the table. They gave about 15,000 soldiers. The Chechens, ironically, came to the table, even though they were at war with Putin at one time. And the Wagner Group, which has now been disbanded, they're running out of soldiers, and they're using manipulative tactics to lure them in Africa. The best target are impoverished youth that have no job, and they're promised riches and money for a job. It's no different with radicalizing jihadists in parts of the country where they have no hope. And that's, when you have poverty and corruption, this is a feeding ground for this kind of activity. So it's very unfortunate.
Okay. Now we're about winding down, but let's have your final thoughts. Let's begin with you, Alexander. Well,
I think this has been politicized. There's obviously conflict between the Zuma family and the current ruling party in South Africa. I think they've got to settle that in South Africa. From an international perspective, 17 young men serving in the Russian army shouldn't really make a difference, and it shouldn't be labeled on a South African problem. I think it's a global problem because of Russian recruitment tactics. Of course, it's going to be politicized, and let's hope it gets worked out, and let's hope South Africa gets invited to the next G20 summit, which ironically is going to be hosted by the United States.
Yeah, let's hope so. All right, so let's hear from you, Willem. Final thoughts?
Thank you. Yes, in the first place, should these people have been deceived in going there, we really hope that they can return safely to their families. And then what we will have to wait is for the law to take its course, the investigation to unearth all the different details. And then those people, if they defrauded these people, if they deceived them, if they trafficked them, then they should face the full might of the law. And at the end of the day, we hope for a positive outcome on this whole saga.
All right. Now, Tebogo, let's hear from you.
Yeah, our position is very clear. Whether this men went there under false pretense or they went on their own, we are saying to the South African government, bring them back home. These people are South Africans. Let them come and face the music. If indeed they went there knowingly so that they are going to fight, even if they went there without knowing that they're going to fight, still bring them back. So our position is very simple. Bring the South Africans back, and then let's interrogate them when they're in the country.
All right. So I think that's where we wrap up the show. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Willem Els, Senior Training Coordinator in ACT Program Institute for Security Studies. Alexander van Rugen, Global Policy Analyst, and also Tebogo Mashilompane. I hope I got that right. National Leader Forum for South Africa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time once again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.